Why don't you go and try out a gluten-free diet for the next 2 weeks? If you like, stick to it. If you don't, go back to eating bread. Simple as that. So today I want to talk about the experiment that I want you to try out. I want to talk about what this has done to me and others that I have given the same advice. I also want to talk about why it doesn't make sense for us humans to consume grains to the extent that we are consuming them in, today's times. And then I also want to talk about what you can eat instead of said grains so you will still get adequate nutrition. Let's get started. So for the next 2 weeks you are going to eliminate all grains, everything. No pizza, bread, bagels, pasta, nothing, okay? And this does not only go for wheat, this also goes for barley, millet, amaranth, no grains, no corn, eliminate everything. Rice usually is an exception for many people, but even that, try to eliminate it for 2 weeks, okay? See after those 2 weeks if you feel better. If you don't, reintroduce the grains. If you reintroduce them and you get a bad reaction, you know that you are sensitive to gluten. You know that you are sensitive to maybe even other grains. For example, I can't eat any grains with the exception of rice. So, once you've done that little experiment, you know for sure that your health will be better off without grains. Then it's up to you if you want to go and keep doing that, keep going on a gluten-free diet or even a grain-free diet. And, well, your health will be thankful for that for the rest of your life. It's a pretty easy experiment and there's really no reason for you not to try it. I mean, it's just 2 weeks and trust me, it might sound a little bit dull to not eat bread, but there are easy ways to come and get around it. Okay? So, what has this done to me and others? The problem with gluten intolerance or allergies or Crohn's disease that the symptoms are wide in variety. Some of us, we get stomach cramps, get constant diarrhea. Some of us, we get brain fog. Some of us, we start to vomit and get acne and whatever, Everyone responds to it differently. And this is what I've seen with people. Some of us will even lose weight once we get off gluten. We will get to a better body fat percentage. So the results you will get on a gluten-free diet are, well, many. Can be, you can experience many things. So what I've experienced is, for me, I had to quit gluten. I was having constant stomach cramps from eating bread. I had constant diarrhea. I was very pale. And it wasn't really exactly good for my mental health either because, I was in constant pain. So I eliminated the grains and probably still up to this day, it's probably like the best decision I've made in, nutrition-wise. Now, I've probably been sensitive to gluten and most other grains for a large part of my life. But it was only up until I was, I think, 19 years old or 18 years old that I was really starting to get trouble with this. So the fact that you're not having a lot of trouble with it now doesn't mean that that's not going to ever happen to you, okay? It can happen to everyone. Like, I used to be someone that would eat quite a lot of bread. I would eat a lot of grains. But eventually I was simply not able to do it anymore because, it was just too painful. And I was losing weight. And I was sick all the damn fucking time. So, that's why I eliminated it. So what have I seen with other people that I recommend to do the same? Pretty much 100% of the people that I recommend to do this improve their health. They will lose weight, they will feel better, they get more energy, they get a sharper mind. It improves them pretty much on basically everything. They become better athletes, they become more vibrant people, and they become more likable people. They get a better mood as well. So the results are quite impressive. And now a friend of mine actually was able to lose some more weight because he went gluten-free. So it's pretty interesting. Some of us, we will, like, for some of us, being fat or having more body fat than usual can be due to an intolerance for example, gluten. It can also happen with an intolerance to dairy. You know, there are many intolerances. I'm, for example, I'm intolerant to bananas. I can't eat bananas. Fuck my life. I really like bananas. But yeah, fucking trains. Everyone in my family that goes gluten-free also improves their health dramatically, like especially in the terms of digestion. So I think that it is something that is usually, you know, if you have it, there's a good chance that your whole family will benefit from going gluten-free, or at least a large part. So yeah, let's talk about why it doesn't make sense to eat grains. Now, there are two reasons why it doesn't make sense for us to eat grains, at least not to the extent that we're eating them today. So the first one being is, believe it or not, but grains never grew by the field full, okay? Like, you would find some grains here, you would find some grains there, but never by the field full. It was never enough to make a bread, okay? That's for sure. How much grain do you think is needed for one bread? I'm not sure, but I know it's a lot. And how long does it take for most of us to eat that bread? You know, if you're going to eat it by yourself. A few days, 4 days maybe, to eat an entire bread. If you're a big bread eater, maybe a week, if you eat a little less. The amount of grain, the amount of wheat used for that bread, go and try to pick up some grains and try to get the grains from the hull, you know, from the hulls. Try to dehull the grains and see how long it takes you to get that. You can use some tools if you can find them. Use some stones if that makes it a little bit easier to get out the grains. Sure, go ahead. Make it as easy for you as possible. And guess what? It takes a long ass time. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. And we only start to do that like 10,000 years ago. That's when we started to grow grains by the field full. It has been pretty recent when we started to actually make flour from wheat. Think no longer than 10,000 years ago. That's when we really started to grow fields full of wheat. We really started to grow it to make flour for breads. And before that, we simply didn't do that. So it's a pretty recent thing for us that we are eating grains to this extent. It's a pretty recent development. Before that, yeah, you would be lucky to find a few grains here and there. I'm not gonna say that we never ate them, but it was so much of a hassle to get a few grains. And nowadays it's like the biggest staple in everyone's diet. It makes no sense at all. Even the FDA, I think, or like what's the nutrition pyramid or something, the diet pyramid, recommends that it's the biggest staple in everyone's diet. Based on what? Makes no fucking sense. It's not like an exceptionally high source of nutrition anyway. So it's complete insanity to recommend it as like the biggest staple in everyone's diet. But I guess it's very cheap. It's pretty cheap to produce it. And that might have something to do with it. I've no idea. Like, I'm not into conspiracies, or not conspiracies like that, but it's pretty insane that it would be recommended as the biggest staple, even though like there's no basis to suggest that it's like the healthiest food for us. So we have never eaten it to that extent to begin with. And actually, if you think about it, what mammal next to us makes grains a big staple in their diet? No creature does that, okay? Or well, at least no mammal does that. I mean, there are some insects that do it. Some birds eat a lot of grains, but no mammal. Because again, you know, there are nowhere fields full of grains in nature. So it makes no sense. Now the second thing why it doesn't make sense, and before people tell me, but you are a vegan that eats beans. doesn't the same argument go for beans? Yes! Beans are a very big logical problem with the vegan diet. It's very hard. No, actually, it's straight up impossible to go out in nature and find yourself a pound of beans every day just to get your protein fix, okay? Simply not doable, would never happen. It's true. It's a real big problem. I eat them, I have no issue with them. Some people are very sensitive to them. Wouldn't recommend those people to eat them. But I have no problem with them, and the thing is, compared to grains, more people seem to be sensitive to grains, and there's also the thing that you have more of a chance to prepare beans properly. And grains actually, you know, they inhibit absorption from certain minerals to a very serious extent. For example, wheat can inhibit iron absorption to a very serious extent, which is why I was always pale when I was a bread eater. I was always iron deficient. And it is why I now have a healthy complexion. But with beans I don't get that, and usually the mineral and vitamin absorption is pretty negligible. It's not as serious as with wheat. That's not to say that, you know, it's normal and natural to eat beans, at least not to this extent. So the second thing being is, and I kind of already said this, I prepare my beans properly. I give them a good soak. I actually will ferment them a little bit beforehand if I get the chance. And if you look at groups of people, actually if you look at tribes that are now, you know, growing grains, that actually, you know, make it a part of their diet, what you always see is that they properly ferment the grains. Which is a huge thing to consider, because the breads you buy in store now, they are not properly fermented. I mean, they're fresh grains and they just like, they add some yeast to it, just let it ferment or whatever. It's improperly fermented. It's not properly fermented bread. So, you know, the anti-nutrient content stays very high in those store-bought breads. Whereas if it's properly fermented, you end up with a completely different product, which is a lot better and easier for your digestion. But again, you will not find that in Western society. As you know, especially gluten intolerance has become a very big problem in the most recent years, because we don't properly ferment our grains anymore. Like, we always used to properly ferment them, but we haven't been doing that for a while because it's simpler not to. It's better for, you know, factory production. And who the fuck cares if some people get ill from that, right? I mean, for the same reason, iodine deficiency is now becoming a rampant problem here in the Netherlands. Because nowadays, the breads, you know, they used to have like iodized salt in them, but not anymore. There's never been a warning about that, but you can just find it. Since a few years, we stopped using iodized salt for our breads. Well, fucking fantastic, isn't that? Now like 80% of people here in the Netherlands have an iodine deficiency. Awesome. No, it isn't. A third thing you might want to consider is that I have heard that when it comes to pesticides, and you know, pesticides is a problem with every food group, or all plant-based food groups, that is. But from what I've heard, for some reason the absorption of pesticides in grains is a lot higher. So the amount that you actually absorb also increases. And this has something to do, especially in wheat, with how gluten works. Gluten is kind of a binder, and it binds a lot more pesticides. But I'm not too sure about this. This is something you would have to, you know, figure out yourself. It's not something that I've done, you know, a lot of research on. But that could be a potential third reason. So now here's the thing. What are you going to eat instead? Because this is probably the biggest reason why no one actually wants to do this. Also, bread is very addictive to many people. So if you're going to quit eating bread, the biggest thing you are going to crave is most likely going to be sugar and carbohydrates. So I would recommend you to increase your fruit intake. That will help you to get the same amount of calories that you would otherwise get from, well, the breads. So while almost all fruits will be an improvement over eating bread, they're not all equal. But I would say go and eat what you like, okay? So for the next 2 weeks, go and eat the fruits that you really like. So if you like to eat a lot of apples, go and eat a lot of apples. I would also recommend you to eat a lot of dried fruits, like dates and raisins, because they simply hold, you know, a lot of calories. It's also true that, you know, while bread is mostly carbohydrates, some of us, we eat things like cheese or peanut butter on our bread, so that also makes it a rich source of protein and fats. You have to consider that. You will have to also compensate for that, which I would recommend you to do later on the day, because fruit doesn't really mix well with other food groups. So it will mean that you will have to eat an extra serving of meat or an extra serving of beans. And for fats it would mean you have to eat, like if you're a vegan, you would have to eat an extra serving of avocado or coconut. It's as simple as that. At least make sure that you're still hitting your macros, because you have to consider that, you know, it will become very hard if you are actually going to you know, lower your actual food intake by doing this. You will have to compensate with for all your macros when you're cutting out bread, because, you know, usually it's only a source of carbohydrates, but since we like to add something to the bread, it also becomes a rich source of other things as well, you know, of fats and protein. So be sure that you're going to compensate for that. With all that being said, go and try out a gluten-free diet today. Go and try it out for the next 2 weeks and tell me if it has helped you. I thank you all for watching and see you all in the next video.